Growing up, um, both my parents are writers, so it's only natural that my love for it came from the two of them. Um, they used to tell us stories just about every night. Most of them are ones they'd make up right on the spot. My dad was into making children's stories. My mom's an inspirational coach, life coach. Um, I can't pinpoint the exact moment in my life where writing really started for me. When I was little, um, my three younger sisters, the three just after me, I used to write them stories. Actually, it was called The Three Little Girls and the Big Hairy Thing. Um, I think that's one of my earliest memories of one of the first stories I started writing that was my own. My parents used to write stories, so I kind of make my own little fan fictions of them. But when I started writing my own stories, I feel that was one of the first that I did myself. That was completely out of my own imagination. Um, when I was 4, so my parents keep telling me, is when I read my first book. I believe it was called The Big Surprise. It was 140 or 60 something pages, and my dad said I read it all. It must have made a huge impact on him because he can still remember the amount of pages. I'll have to ask him. Um, as a writer, I find that sometimes your head gets in the way. Because when I was younger, when I write, whatever came to mind, I wrote it. It didn't matter if it was ridiculous, if it was not even possible, like the physics of everything. It didn't matter. I sat down, I wrote it, and it came from here, every bit of it. But the older you get, as with a lot of things I find in life, your head gets in the way. Things you've heard gets in the way. Things are said to you. And it starts building block by block this wall to your free imagination. Now there's the barriers of what's real, what's not, what makes sense, what doesn't, how people will think or look at you if you think that way, write that way. And then there's that feeling of wanting to be perfect, want to sound right, be right. And you lose a lot of your creative spark in that. I found that that's happened to me, and I'm sure a lot of other writers like me, where you feel the need for your readers to like you, for those who hear your voice not to hear, I guess, your actual voice. Because your actual voice is that little person inside you who thinks the craziest things, hopes for the fantastical, the amazing. And I feel like no matter what you do, that is something that will get curbed a little bit the older you grow. Especially in our society, it's just kind of hard to keep your creative juices of when you were little, when you're older. For me, being a writer is very important because I want to share the imagination that I see. I want to share the world that is in my mind with everybody. I want them to feel that same wonder, that feeling whenever they pick up my book and start reading. Everyone has that moment. Everyone. You can't tell me you haven't. Where there's something more out there. There's just something out there just beyond our grasp. It's just waiting to be discovered. And my way of finding it, feeling it, even if I can't actually have it, is when I read a book. And there was a particular book that made me feel that wonder, that excitement, that I guess it's more of that childhood feeling again, where anything at all was possible. That book was called Inkheart. It's a trilogy, the Inkheart trilogy. But that first book, it opened my eyes to something amazing. And actually wasn't the first book, actually. The first one I read was Ink Spell, which is the second one in the series. I found out I hated not reading from the beginning when that happened, by the way. I found the book, Ink Spell, and it really caught my attention. I loved the title. I loved there's just something about the book that just called me, and I needed to read it. See, when I was younger, I preferred reading smaller books. The big books, my love for it came when I was older, and then I didn't want to read anything smaller. So when I was younger, I read those small books. When I was older, I only wanted to read thick ones. But after reading this book, that was kind of the halfway between both, I found a love for all books, really. Ones that inspire the deepest parts of you. In there, this author, Cornelia Funke, she found a way to create a world, and in a way no one else I've ever heard of write it. She was the first person I ever heard of that wrote a story where you could read your characters right out of the book and make them physical. That was amazing to me. It was an idea no one else I've ever read. It was an idea no one else I'd ever seen, ever heard of, had. And it was amazing. I knew right there and then, that's the kind of author I wanted to be. Someone who came up with an idea no one else had. Someone who could inspire the wonder and the amazement in everyone else. I think that's kind of why I am the writer I am now. My parents were a big part of it. A huge part. But reading that book, I think it solidified something in me that I found a passion that I really want to go with. And I feel this is a struggle most writers, if not all, have to go through, where we have to find back that childhood spark, that mini me that was able to create whatever she wanted, however she wanted it, just because it was amazing to me. Writer's block is something I experience. It's not a one-time thing. It's just something like you get spurts of inspiration, you write it down, and then it's just you go into a slump again. You can't think of anything to write. And I think a lot of that comes from just what's happening around you. It's not even nothing that has to do with actual writing or your inspiration. It's still there. It's just, I guess, blocked. And working through it can be a little tough sometimes because you want the inspiration. You can feel that inspiration, but you can't touch it. It's just out of reach, and you just can't seem to get it to go anywhere. None of the words come out right or come to you at all sometimes. And just sometimes it's a bit discouraging. I guess that's the word, discouraging. Yeah, that's basically it. Because when you're discouraged from something, even if it's something you love, it makes it harder to do. So that's something I am working through right now, actually, writer's block. And I think that's why I started this blog in the first place. Because I figured I need to remember what my purpose for writing in the first place was. And my purpose was to help others feel that exact same joy I did every time I picked up a book. Every time I pulled out my paper and my pencil and I started writing. I wanted everyone to feel that, to understand that that joy inside of you, you can explore it. You can make it your own. And yeah, I think that's how I'm going to work through my writer's block. This blog will help me reconnect with the love of my writing. And I hope you join me.